Hi everyone, welcome to this special Christmas edition of In the Labs. My name's David and today I'm going to be taking you through how to make this winter Christmas scene. So with that, we'll get into the software.
Right, because there's no 3D elements to the project that we're going to be making today, I'm going to be working in Cut 2D. And the first thing that we need to do is open up the wintersceneproject.crv file, which is available in the project packs, which you can access through your V&Co portal accounts. So once we've opened the file, first thing that we'll be faced with is the final layout for the assembly of our slot together project. And I'll just briefly explain this. We've got a backing with some mountain silhouettes and some trees. That'll be slotted into the back slot here that you can see. Then in front of that, we've got a house scene with some foreground trees. And in the foreground, we've got a snowman and a sledge. And then underneath, we can see the front and sides, which will act as a plinth to place all this on. And before we get into how to make this, we'll just quickly look over the job setup. So this will be specific to the material that you're using, but my material dimensions 27.5 inches by 19.6, and I've got a material thickness of 0.118 inches. I'm going to set the Z0 to the material surface and the XY datum in the lower left, and we don't need to discuss anything else in there, so we can close out. The main focus of this project is going to be the freehand drawing tool, which I use to create this snowman and the sledge, and also the tree shape that you can see in both the background and the foreground. So I'm just going to go up into the layers list and I'm going to switch over to our first scene that we're going to look at. Now, I've already got the base with the tabs attached already set up here, so all I need to do is create this snowman and sledge, and then we can place it on there. And we'll start by going over under Create Vectors into the freehand drawing tool. Now, this tool is a really great option for creating organic shapes because it closely mimics the action of drawing with a physical pen and paper. So don't need to worry too much about these settings at the moment. So to create my snowman, I'm going to draw one side, and I actually want it to be symmetrical. So we can draw just the left-hand side rather, and then mirror it over. So to do that, I'm just going to start at the bottom where it's going to join the base. Don't have to worry about where I draw this or the scale, because we can always change that. And I'm just going to sketch out basic snowman shape. Moving up to the head, and peak of that. It's gone off the workspace there, but I don't need to worry. Okay, so now we've created that. Can move this down. Now we've got one half of our snowman drawn. We're going to select that, and we're going to go under Transform Objects to the Mirror Selected Objects tool. I'm going to have Create a Mirrored Copy selected. I'm going to click right, and that will create another copy on the other side. So you can see that we've got a full, fairly snowman looking profile there. But I'm just going to quickly change this slightly because I've made him a bit too skinny now. So I'll just undo that operation and go back into node editing. And I'm just going to extend this line out again because it's the central point where we're going to be mirroring from. And we'll just repeat that. And it just shows that you can go in and edit the lines that you've drawn with the freehand drawing tool, just to change the way that they look, and it helps you to really hone in on the shape that you're going for. So there we go, we've got our initial snowman outline. So now all I need to do is create some eyes and also a nose. So to do that, I could use the Create Shape tools, but I do want it to look more natural. Want it to look like a lump of coal, so I'm going to click and drag to start my line, and I'm not going to worry about making this too circular. Now, quick tip for the freehand draw tool: once you've got to a point where you'd like to create a closed vector, and the line is fairly near the start point, you can press tab on the keyboard, and that'll join it into a complete closed vector, you can see there. And then again, that's open for editing. I'm going to hold down Control and drag out, and that'll give me my second eye. And then I'm also going to rotate that slightly just to give it a variation between the first one, again, so it looks more natural. And going back into the freehand drawing tool again, I'm I'm going to zoom in and create a carrot for our snowman's nose. Now, thinking about the machining process here, I didn't want this going past the boundary of the snowman profile because it might lead to an area of material which is too skinny for machining. So I decided to do this internally. So once it's cut out, it does still look like a snowman's nose, luckily. And there we go. It's really starting to take shape now. So the other thing that we want to add in is just some buttons, again, mimicking the coal buttons of an actual snowman. So to do that, I'm still going to use these same kind of circular shapes that I've drawn there, but I want to lay these out so it gives it, so it follows the profile of the mounds of snow which are making up the snowman. So first of all, I'm just going to draw two lines, a point there and a point there, and then click N on the keyboard to go into node editing, and I'm going to turn these into beziers, and that will allow me to drag out the handles and alter the shape of these individually. And once I've done that, I'm going to grab a copy and move it down onto the line, and then we're going to use the copy along vectors tool to create a copy of these circles which traces this line. So we'll go into there, select the object that we want to copy first, and then the one that we're copying along, and it's preset 6 copies. That sounds about right, so we'll see what that looks like, and it'll evenly space those out. And if I just delete out the line now, maybe just move these down, give them a bit more of a neck, and make them slightly smaller. If you select them together, you can edit the size globally. Perfect, happy with that. So now we've got our snowman complete. The second object that I want to place in the foreground is going to be a sledge. So again, using the freehand drawing tool for this, it's going to bump these options up slightly because I need to be a little bit more accurate with this one. So again, sketching with the freehand drawing tool and then using node editing to tweak it. And there we go, that's my rough outline of a sledge. And now I've got my two foreground objects for my winter scene. I'm just going to select them individually and just resize them down so that they're in scale to the rest of the background. Don't have to be too accurate about this, I'm just eyeballing it really, just seeing what looks good. I'll just place it above the line. That looks about right. It's a fairly small snowman compared to the sledge, but we do need our objects to stand out when they're casting a shadow against the background. Okay, so now we've got that, I need to now think about joining these to the base so that we create one complete part. So to do that, I'm going to use the interactive trim tool under Edit Objects. Let's go into there. I'm going to have rejoin trim sections checked, and I'm just going to chop out these lines. And you'll see as I do that, that then joins this snowman shape to the rest of the strip, creating a complete closed vector. So I'll just quickly do that for the sledge as well. And there we go. And with that, that's the foreground of our winter scene complete. So we can move on now to the next part. So if I just go back up into my layers tab, switch off the snowman scene, switch over into the house scene, turn on the visibility, you'll see that I've already drawn out a house shape here. I'm not going to get too much into detail with this, so I won't copy the steps used to create this again. So that's there already, and what I do want to create here with the freehand drawing tool is some trees in the foreground. So with that, go back into the freehand drawing tool. I'm going to leave the smoothness and stabilize around the center point. Okay, so again, I'm going to click and hold the left mouse button and drag out to start drawing. And just going to sketch out the left hand side of my Christmas tree. Okay, there we go. And just down again for the trunk. Before I do that actually, because I can see that the trunk's actually gone past the centre line here, I'm just going to quickly edit that. And that should create a better copy for the mirror. Mirror that right, there we go. That's looking good, but the trunk's a bit skinny there. But again, it's not to worry, we can edit this out. So because I actually want to profile the shape out, I can't actually make the trunk to the scale that would be realistic with a tree like this. To make it slightly shorter as well, just to aid the machining process. And there we go, that's our basic tree shape. And all I need to do now is just move this into position. I'm going to create a couple of copies of this to create the impression of a bit of a wooded area next to the house. First I'll just join that using the join vectors tool into a complete closed shape. I'll pick that up, resize it, place it there, and then I'm going to hold down Control and drag out to create another copy, and I want 3 trees in total. So we'll do that. Let's make these much smaller, again to give the impression that they're in the background, and the central one's going to be larger so it appears as if it's in the foreground. Again, don't need to be too accurate with this. The other thing that I need to think about as well is that there's going to be adequate gaps for the tool to actually get around and profile this out. So I have done that in the final layout. But the purpose of this is just demonstrating the basic principles of creating these, really. So I don't need to worry too much about that here. There we go. Now those are in place, then go into the interactive trim tool, just trim these away. There we go. So now we've got the 2 foreground scenes, we need to have a look at the background. So I'll just switch over to that layer, and you can see all I've got here is just a rectangular shape with tabs. So for this, I actually found it easier to draw out a quick sketch of a mountain silhouette, which I then scanned, brought into the software and traced. So I'm just going to import the vectors for this. Because with the time that we've got today, I haven't really got time to be going through the full tracing process. So I'll just move that into position, and all I want to do is just connect this to the backing. So I'm just going to delete out this line, and in node editing, just pick these 2 points with shift held down, right click and join vectors with a line. I'm moving over to the other side. We can do the same here as well with close vectors. And there we go. Now I did find when I came to cut this actually that some of these areas were a bit too skinny. They looked great, gave an impression of a snow on the side of the mountains, but particularly this edge was really skinny and did actually break off. So another thing to keep in mind when you're drawing things using the freehand drawing tool. So I'll just bring that in slightly. These were fine, but depending on the material and the tooling that you use, then you may find that you want to broaden these strips slightly. And that's a complete close shape for the profile of our backing. So another thing that I actually added in is taking my basic tree outline and placing it in the foreground of the background, so it looks like a forest just in front of the mountains. But this I'm actually going to profile onto the back, so we don't need to worry about cutting these out. So that's all fine. And the last shape that I created for this is actually a snowflake design to go on the front of the panels for the front and sides. So I actually created this myself using the draw rectangle tool by arranging a series of thin rectangles, which I then used the circular copy tool, and then after doing that it's just a case of welding them together. Okay, so with all the shapes created for our project, we need to start thinking now about how we're going to slot this together. And this just involves allowances to make sure that the parts fit snugly together and the sides aren't meeting and stopping you from joining it. Also adding just a little bit of an overcut to allow for the radius of the tool. So if you imagine the tool's going in here, it's not quite getting into the sharp external corners. And a way that we can do that is actually using the fillet tool. And this works by just creating a bit of a radius in these corners and just machine out this area so you've got a bit more room to play with. So we'll go over into Edit Objects and into the fillet tool. Now the tool that I'm going to be using is 0.0393 inches, and this is because it's just been converted from a 2mm tool, so it's a metric tool, 2mm in diameter that is. So I'm going to select the dog bone fillet and we'll bring that over, and all you need to do, place it in the corner that you'd like to place a fillet. You'll see the tick appear and we'll click left click to place that. For a more in-depth demonstration of this, I'd recommend watching the three-legged table video where we go through this tool in detail, but for the purposes of this, just wanted to show you exactly what I'm doing here. I'll just go across and place that in all the corners, just to make sure that the tool can access these areas and we're not having a nightmare putting this together. There we go, and we then need to repeat this process with all of the other tabs. So for example, we click onto the back, you can see I've already placed them here. And also with the slots, so if I switch to the base, you can see they've been placed in these corners as well. Now, the other thing that we need to account for with the slot together project is the material thickness. So for me, I'm using the 0.118 inch thick material. So the slots have been created to accommodate that. But I appreciate that you might not have access to what is actually 3mm thick material. So we've actually included a layer in the project file called edit tabs. So if I just switch to this, it's just like the full layout, but you can see that the tabs at the moment are just complete rectangles. So if you've got a different material thickness, all you'd need to do is change the dimensions of these rectangles and use the weld and the subtract tools to actually create a complete profile for this. So to do that, you'd select the outline, for example the side here, and then for an internal notch, we'd use the subtract tool, and repeat the same for that side. And then for the external tab, do the same, select the two vectors, and use the weld function. And there you can see that's been created into a complete profile. So that's all you need to do, just change the dimensions of these rectangles, get them filleted using the correct radius for your tool, and that should be all set up ready for you to cut this project yourself. Okay, so with that I'm just going to switch back to my final layout, which I showed you at the beginning, and we can quickly look at the toolpath in now and get this machined. So that's my final layout. Just going to switch over. I've already got the toolpath set up, so I'm just going to briefly talk through these. So first off, I've got a profile for all these detailings. Originally I was going to use a V-bit for this, but when it came to machining, I actually, in error, set everything up and then completely forgot the first toolpath I was running would need to be the V-bit tool. So that's one thing to watch out for really when you make last minute changes. So I've certainly learned from that. Okay, so I'm going to be using the 2mm end mill. One pass because it's only 0.05 inches on the vectors. Don't need to worry about the other settings, and we can calculate that. And there's actually only two toolpaths here, and we're using the same tool. So the second would be the cutout pass. So you can see the tabs that I've entered. I may have gone a little bit overboard with the tabs here, but because of this being my first solo machining experience, I didn't want to leave anything up to chance. So cut depth, gone a little bit past the 0.118 material thickness, just to make sure that it cuts through correctly and we don't have any membrane on the back. Because I'm going to be using MDF, it tends to tear on the top, well, the bottom layer. Same end mill, 2mm. Make sure that you change this to reflect your tool and settings, and make sure that the feeds and speeds are appropriate for your machine. Outside right, we are going to add a bit of an allowance offset here, and this is to account for the slots and tabs to make sure that there's a bit of breathing space, so they're going to fit snugly but not so tight that you can't actually get them in. So that's minus 0.02. As I said, I've got the tabs set up at 0.039 in thickness. I'm going to be adding ramps to my toolpath, so smooth ramps with distance 0.2 inches and also a lead in and lead out. So with everything selected, click calculate. The warning's just telling me that it's going to cut past the material thickness, which I already know, so that's fine. And there we have our full toolpaths. So we can just preview these. Okay, so really simple set of toolpaths, but I'm really happy with how this looks actually. So excited to get this cut now. So all we need to do at this stage is go into the Save Toolpaths form, select the relevant post-processor for your machine, and make sure you check the toolpaths to be saved list. Here I'm going to select them so they're both visible. Because it's the same tool, I could output it to the same one, but just to be sure, again, with my first solo machining experience, I'm going to have 2 toolpath files. I'll click Save Toolpaths, and we'll get these saved away for machining. So now we've got this all drawn out, arranged, and toolpathed, we can now have a look to see how the machining process goes.
Okay, so because we're going to be using a much smaller tool than I've been used to using in the past here today, just going to run a quick test cut in the bottom right hand corner, just to make sure that our feeds and speeds and everything are safe and appropriate. Okay, so we've just finished the test cut, and I'm glad I did because we just needed to shift the material over slightly to account for the offset that I've added in, because I can actually screw it down on the very corner of the material. So now we've done that, we're happy with the positioning and feeds and speeds, so we're ready to get into the final cut. Right then, the part's all cut out. Loving the look of the layout on here. So we've done a bit of sanding just to clear off some of the fuzzy edges, and now I'm just going to use box knife just to see if I can cut the tabs off whilst it's on the bed. Okay, with the machining and assembly process complete, here we are with our final part. So generally I'm really happy with the way that this has turned out. Couple of things that I might have looked to change if I did cut this again. You might see that at the edge here, I've got a bit of an area where the material's broken off because I made it too thin. So I'll thicken that up. Did have to recut the front panel because I resized everything and didn't actually resize that. So just had to sort that out, and also I ended up using an end mill instead of a V-bit for the snowflakes and for the background trees. Really happy with how it's come out, as I said. If you'd like to follow along also and cut this out yourself, then all the project files will be available to you on your V&Co account. And hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for joining me. So if you'd like to, please share and subscribe, and thank you for watching.